People love to say justice is blind, but if you have lived long enough inside certain skin, you learn pretty fast that sometimes justice looks real hard, squints a little, then decides it already knows the answer. And that afternoon on Route 17 was one of those moments, the kind you don't forget even if you want to. I wasn't rushing, wasn't angry, wasn't doing anything wrong, I was just driving. Hands steady on the wheel, letting the sound of that old engine fill the quiet that had moved into my chest a couple hours earlier. Because yeah, I had just buried my husband. And no, I didn't feel like talking to anyone about it, especially not a man with a badge who made up his mind the second he saw me. The lights hit my mirror, hard red and blue, flashing like an accusation, and my stomach dropped the way it always does, not because I was guilty, but because experience teaches you that innocence doesn't always protect you. You know what I mean? I pulled over, slow, clean, signaled like I was supposed to shut the engine off, hands right there on the wheel where he could see them the way I'd taught my son years ago. And when the officer stepped out, heavy boots, thick neck, hand resting on his holster like a reminder, he didn't say hello, didn't ask how my day was going, just leaned down and said, "That's a real expensive car for someone like you." And right there, I knew this wasn't about traffic, wasn't about safety, wasn't even about the car, it was about me. I told him the truth calmly, that the car belonged to my husband, that he'd restored it over years, nights in the garage with music playing, low grease under his nails, pride in his eyes. Every time that engine turned over, and when the officer asked where my husband was and I said we'd buried him that afternoon, I expected maybe silence, maybe an awkward pause, maybe even nothing at all. But what I got was a look that said he didn't believe me, didn't want to believe me, and didn't care if it was true, and then he told me to step out of the car. I moved slow, narrated every motion like I was taught, seatbelt off, door open, feet on gravel, heat still clinging to the air, and when he told me to put my hands on the hood and spread my feet, something in me cracked. Just a little, not loud, not dramatic, just enough to remind me how small moments can carry big weight. I offered to show him the registration, offered calmly, politely, and he snapped back that he didn't ask. Kicked my ankles apart harder than necessary and patted me down like he was annoyed every time he didn't find something. Like disappointment was part of the routine. All he got was a tissue and a rosary, and he muttered something under his breath, then walked back to his cruiser. But he didn't get in, no. He leaned against it, lit a cigarette, and watched me stand there. Minutes stretching, thin cars rolling by. Slow people staring, then looking away, that quiet public humiliation that settles into places you can't logic your way out of. When he finally came back and said the system was down and he couldn't confirm ownership, I thought foolishly maybe that meant I'd be free to go, but he laughed and said he was impounding the car, and that's when my voice started to shake, because that car wasn't just metal and paint, it was memory. It was my husband's hands. It was the last thing that still smelled like him, and when I said it needed special handling, that it was a classic, he barked for me to put my hands back on the hood, reached for his taser, said I was resisting. And before I could process how fast everything turned cold, metal closed around my wrists, and I was pushed into the back of his cruiser like I weighed nothing at all. Inside, it was freezing, my wrists burned, and through the window I watched him open the car door with no gloves, toss papers aside, handle things like they didn't matter, like the years of care meant nothing, and then I saw him pick up the box, the one thing I hadn't been able to leave behind at the cemetery, and my heart slammed so hard I thought I might be sick. He opened it, held up the metal, scoffed, called it fake hero junk, and I slammed my shoulder against the door, shouted for him to put it down, and he walked over and dropped it onto the dashboard like it was trash, and yeah, that happened. That was the moment something shifted in me, something quiet but solid, and right. Then my phone started ringing, that familiar ringtone I'd never changed, and he reached in, looked at the screen, smirked, and answered it on speaker. He told my son I was under arrest for vehicle theft, said I could meet him at county jail if I had paperwork, and when my son's voice came through, calm, steady, asking where I was, I could hear the tension under it, the kind that means trouble for someone, and when my son told him politely to uncuff me and apologize, the officer laughed, accused him of threatening a cop, and hung up, shaking his head like he'd won something. I closed my eyes, then felt that strange mix of fear and pity settle in my chest, because some people have no idea how small they really are until the world shows them. 10 minutes later, the ground started to vibrate. Not loud at first, just a hum you feel before you hear, and headlights crested the hill. Not one car, but several moving, fast, too fast. Black SUVs, government plates, motorcycles escorting, not leading, and they didn't pass, they surrounded us. Doors opening in perfect rhythm. Men stepping out with calm purpose. Weapons down but ready. And suddenly the officer who'd felt so big looked very small. When my son stepped out of the lead vehicle in full dress uniform, medals catching the flashing lights, calm, written into every step he took, the officer froze, stammered, tried to remember his authority, but it was already gone. My son opened the door himself, took my hands, saw the cuffs, and his jaw tightened in a way I hadn't seen since he was a teenager, protecting something he loved, and he told the officer quietly to remove them. And the cuffs hit the ground like punctuation. Federal agents moved in, badges changed hands, weapons were removed, and the story the officer had written in his head unraveled in seconds. And later, when the footage went public, when people saw what I'd felt the internet did, what it does, found patterns, found history, found truth he thought would stay hidden. He lost his job, then his house, then his family. And no, I didn't celebrate, I didn't speak publicly about him at all, because sometimes the loudest statement is silence. A year later, I stood in front of a community center named after my husband, built with money I donated in full, and across the street, a man in an orange vest picked up trash, avoiding my eyes, and I didn't feel victory. I felt peace, because justice didn't roar that day. It corrected. And maybe that's what real accountability looks like. So here's the thing I want to ask you honestly. Was this justice, or was it just overdue consequences? And how many moments like this never get a camera, never get a convoy, never get corrected at all? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what you've seen, what you've lived, because these stories don't end on the road. They end when we stop pretending they don't happen. And if this hit home for you, stick around, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and yeah, let's talk about it.